My name is John Brittain. I'm here with Jeanette Esparza to do a coaching session for teacher leadership for Kennesaw State University. Okay, Jeanette, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Okay, so we had time to think about your lesson a little bit. What do you think went really well with that lesson?
I think what went well was that they were interacting the whole time. They didn't have an option not to interact with the lesson.
So you say that you thought the best was the way the kids interacted with each other or with you?
With me.
With you?
Yes.
Okay, and what would you say did not go well for you?
Well, some of my slides got cut off, so they didn't see some of the complete questions that I had asked them. So, but I just filled it in at the last minute, like verbally.
Okay, so you felt like that your slides that you prepared using, what did you use?
I used Nearpod and Google Slides.
You used Nearpod and Google Slides, and some of the words that the kids were supposed to see
Right.
got cut off.
Yes.
And you augmented that with verbal instructions.
Yes, but looking
that-
back, I maybe could have written them on the board instead because some kids do better with visual.
Okay, so in the future, you would remedy that by writing it on the board and addressing visual learners that
Yes.
way who might struggle by listening.
Right.
Okay. What do you think was an aha moment maybe in the lesson that you felt like maybe the kids were getting what you were doing?
When I started what's called circling, at first, I make a statement and then I make yes or no questions about it, and then either or, and then like an open ended. The first couple of times I don't think they knew what I was doing because I'd never done it before like that. But I think by the third, fourth time and through repetition, I could see that they knew what I was going for.
So the circling kind of gave them an opportunity to show what they knew.
Yes.
Is that when you were using the slides on the Selena
Yes.
story and using the pictures? Is
Yes.
that when you were circling?
Right.
Okay. And so what's the benefit of circling? What's the value of that?
They get a lot of repetition. I basically say the same phrase and then I ask it in different ways. And they just get that repetition with the words, the target words that they were learning, and they can see it. So the value is the repetition there.
Okay. Tell me more about what you were doing with Nearpod.
I use Nearpod to have them really interact. There's really no chance for them to do anything else, so they have their computer in front of them, and I normally like to stand behind them and walk around so I can see, and that really helps visual learners especially, or students that kind of get sidetracked because I control the lesson, the slides, so they just have to follow along with the slides. And also like the interactive board where I ask them something and then type in their answer, I can see it right then and there, what they're answering. So just for like a quick assessment.
Okay, so you say the benefit of using Nearpod is that you can control the pace of the lesson.
Yes.
And then you can also view the responses immediately.
Yes.
I noticed what you were doing on the formative assessment where they were writing the answers in.
Yes.
That you were most of the answers yes or no on that assessment?
Well, there were a couple. There was one where we reviewed they had learned the vocabulary for that day. That one was actual translating, so I wanted to see how much they understood the words I just gave them and then words we either already knew from the past or they looked like English English words, cognates. So I wanted to see. So that one was kind of open ended, and then the second assessment was formative. Those were all yes or no.
I noticed you were clicking, like you were going across the screen and you were clicking the boxes on each individual's name. Does that give them immediate feedback if they got it right or not?
Yes. I mean, I clicked yes on all of them. I accepted them, but I can quickly check and gauge where they are on that. I like it because it reinforces them, even if they had gotten it wrong.
How would you adjust if you noticed a lot of students were getting it wrong? What would you do for that?
What I would do is click. You can exit out, so they have to retype it. So I would exit out the ones that got it incorrectly, and I would restate and say, like, remember this is what it should be, and then have them try again.
So if you noticed a lot of kids were getting it wrong, what you would do is like restate the question. Would you like rephrase it, or would you say it exactly the same?
No, I would rephrase.
You would rephrase it, and would you rephrase it in the target language in Spanish, not in English?
I would
see. Yeah, I mean just to see if you could reduce it down.
I would still try to rephrase it in the target language, and if I still see some wrong answers, then I would go back. What I do also is maybe put the picture up that I had shown earlier, and I would say remember and show the picture, but still rephrase it in the target language.
Okay. Do you feel like your assessment was an accurate portrayal of what kids were supposed to learn?
I do. Really short of them peeking over each other, there's no way for them to cheat. I mean, they could randomly just put yes or no, but I think for the most part, they can see that I can tell what they're doing, so they're doing the right thing. They're answering to the best of their knowledge. Yeah, I do.
Okay. I also noticed that you did a lot of brain breaks in your class. Can you tell me about why you do that and what benefit do you feel is a brain break for?
Well, classes are an hour and 15 minutes, and it's just a lot, especially when it's 7:15 in the morning, to just sit there for an hour and 15 minutes. So just to re-energize would be the main thing and refocus. And then the brain breaks I do in the target language, so they get a lot of repetition with the language. I do different kinds. I do some have to do with numbers or colors, clothing articles, or articles of clothing, and that's repetition also.
Okay, so the brain breaks help you to reinforce what you're trying to learn through repetition, and also gives them a break from just sitting in their desk.
Right.
And how do you notice that students respond to the brain breaks?
They respond positively. I think they want to. I mean, they might grudge a little bit, like not this again. But once they're into it, they get into it. So I think they enjoy it, and I think they look forward to it. Sometimes when I start doing Nearpod, that helped me stay on task. So I put it in my slides as like it's time for a break. But sometimes, or before, I used to kind of forget, and they would ask me, "Are we having a brain break today?" So that's helped.
So they miss it if you don't do it.
If we don't do it, they miss it, and they ask for it.
Okay. And do you ever use English brain breaks?
No. I mean, I tell them the instructions in English if it's the first time. And we've only been in class 6 weeks, so a lot of these are new. But the actual brain breaks are in Spanish. So
it's always try to remain in Spanish as much as possible during the lesson. Yeah. Okay. Okay, you asked me to look at some data as I was collecting there to see if you were meeting your goal of using more strategies to improve your comprehensible input, and also you said you wanted kids to participate more in the lessons, and so through using more CI that kids would participate. So would you like to hear some of the data that I have collected for you?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the main observed strategies that I marked was using linking meaning to L1. I marked that down 5, 10, 15, 16, 17 times, which is good. To make sure that they understand with English being their first language. And you also were teaching to the eyes a lot, like looking directly at the kids. I would notice you doing that. I looked at that 3 different times on that one. I noticed that you slowed down, like when you were speaking Spanish, because I know as a native speaker you could speak fast if you wanted to, but you would slow down even more to repeat, especially in some of the things like when you were saying se acercó, you really slowed down to really make that go on there. So I noticed you did that. You were sheltering vocabulary, which means that you were focusing on the 3 terms that you had, the se acercó and vio que había. Was that, what was the other one?
Se lo llevó.
Se lo llevó. Okay, yeah. So you were focusing, that was the main structure in all your sentences. So you sheltered the vocabulary. That was really good. I put illustrate twice, but really that was a lot. I guess you didn't really illustrate by drawing, but you showed pictures. So that would have been the same thing basically, because you use pictures all throughout your PowerPoint. You gesture. I caught one gesture that you did. I remember you doing. You said acariciar when you were touching your hand like that. So you were gesturing. That shows meaning. Because, and then you also taught that to L1 because you said caress, right? You said that's how you caress. So you did 2 in 1 for that one. Okay, and then I also made a question tally to notice the number of questions that you were asking and the types of questions that you were doing. So I saw that you had 14 English questions, and then you had 19 Spanish questions. So there was a good balance. What I did notice is that in the beginning you had more English questions, but I think that's normal in the beginning because you're trying to set up the lesson. And then as the lesson went on and deeper into the lesson, then your questions all became in Spanish. This is a continuation of the story. So let me go back. The Amber Alert cut it off, so let me go back and I guess I'm going to have to splice these together. All right, so we were talking about personalized. I'm just going to rephrase this because I don't know if that picked that up. So when you personalize questions, you make it have meaning to the student themselves. So if you're talking about things in the third person about what you're talking about in the story, like you were talking about Selena and you were talking about Chris and you were talking about the flowers in the church, you would want to say to a student, what about in your church? Hay muchas flores en tu iglesia. Or you can say, in tu casa. So what would you do? What is something you could do to personalize a question?
Just along the flower lines one, maybe with girls I can do, would you rather get a lot of flowers or a little bit of flowers? There's one I believe where I said Chris was crying. I asked whether he was crying or smiling. So I could have asked what, if this happened to you, would you smile or would you cry? Or how would you feel? Would you be smiling or would you be crying? That gives me a lot of ideas for next time.
Which Martina Beggs or one of those gurus always call it the PQL, which PQA, not PQL. PQA is personal question and answer, which sometimes you can start the class by asking them personal questions about whatever the lesson is, but personally, what I like to do is I like to mix it in like that during the lesson,
Okay.
because then when you ask them directly, it kind of wakes them up, especially if you notice this kid's not paying attention. Call on them and bring it in. You know, people like to know they do that.
Yeah.
I do a lot of, I do like a personal interview, like I'll pick out kids and I'll bring them and sit in a chair and we'll do that.
Okay.
So, you know, and then that's how I work in some PQA with them, because that way I'll ask them specific questions like, where do you live? And I go over these same things over and over, like, and into the basic, like, what's your name? Where do you live? How old are you? And then I ask them some general things like, do you like ice cream? What do you prefer, vanilla or chocolate? Things that I might not normally get to, but I throw it in there. But also, you can do it during a lesson, like we were just saying, with the personalizing it. It just gives them, it just helps them internalize what you're doing. So that's maybe why the results show that you've got a lot of either or, yes or no, and the 5 other questions, but only one personalized, because you weren't really aware of what, you know, what that would do. So that might be a goal that maybe you want to, for the next time we do sit down and interview, is like, can we introduce some more personalized questions? You know, it's your goal, it's what you want to grow on, but that's just a suggestion on there. I also noticed you had some frequent words on here. I just marked it. I didn't say how often that you did. Says, there is, and sees, but you were doing it in the past tense, so it's basically on there. Okay, so, and I made some notes over here on the insights and ideas about, I noticed that you moved around the room a lot. How that's, you know, proximity control. Do you find that beneficial?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're more alert, I think. I used to have a desk, and I just sometimes just sit there, or just sit in front. And I think they're more alert when I'm walking. They know I'm going to walk around and monitor them.
I also noticed that you have a deskless classroom.
Yes.
And last year you did not have a deskless classroom. How do you feel like that impacts your student achievement this year from what you've seen now that you've been in school for 6 weeks?
They're definitely more on task. I mean, it's hard to have either a laptop out and paper, or a paper out and also their phone, or they really can't doze off. I mean, I have some that manage to pull it off sometimes, but they really can't just put their head down or anything like that. It's very noticeable if they have their phone out and their computer, like they can't really juggle both.
So you feel like it's been a good transition
Absolutely,
to a deskless?
Yeah, I can't imagine going back.
You wouldn't go back?
No.
That's a very scary thought. I've thought about that myself a few times, and like, what would my room and world be like? And I see your room, and it scares me a little bit to want to do that.
Too. And there's some challenges, like you really have to be on all the time. I mean, you can't just, sometimes you just want to sit at your desk and just have them do whatever, like busy work, but that's not an option with this.
Right. Do the kids, what have been their attitudes, have you noticed, about being in the deskless classroom?
They really don't have a bad attitude. I mean, they've asked me if I'll be bringing desks back, and I said no. But they really haven't made any negative comments. They just kind of go with it. Just kind of is what it is. They just come in, we're going to do our work type thing. So they have that attitude. They just know they're going to work today.
Mm-hmm. We're on a hybrid structure where you have some kids in class and you have some kids at home. I counted 15 students in your class that day. How many students would you say were at home on virtual in that class?
That one, I have 27, so 12 would be, you said there were 15, yeah, so it'd be 12.
But 12 at home.
Right.
So what have you done with that lesson to try to reach the kids at home with that same lesson, and like, how do you know that they've comprehended what you want them to know?
It's hard to know, and I just have let go that they'll never have the experience of face to face as much as I try. But they also get the story. I record myself reading the story, so I have it there where they can see it and they can hit play and hear it and read along. They also have the slides, so they can look at the pictures if they're more visual. And as far as activities, they're more a little, they don't get the interaction. I just have the actual phrases, and they just have to put yes or no beside it um, for the yes or no questions. I don't. I haven't found a way to do circling with them online as of yet, so they don't get that. And then they still do the activity, the translations. They do that too, and on that one, no, they haven't done the storyboard on it. They're gonna do a storyboard in the future with that story, where they build, like, they put images in, like drag and drop.
So how do you feel like they're responding as virtual students to your lessons?
It's kind of a mixed bag. I have some that don't do anything or do the bare minimum or don't do it correctly, and then some are just on task. Because I put everything in order, like read this, do this next, and I put everything. I put a video that I tell them what they're gonna do for that day. The ones that do the work, I mean, they're still getting the CI. They're listening to the story or reading it and doing all of that. Not up for an hour and 15 minutes, but they get some of it.
I also noticed that you gave the Mi Diccionario to practice the words that they just learned, or they would write a sentence, and then they had to put a picture in on there. And did you use the music as a timer, or was it just, what was that for?
I always have music playing just so they get the experience of listening to music they wouldn't normally hear outside of the classroom. I do just, if it's in Spanish and it's school appropriate, I'll play it. So I already had like a time limit set, like maybe 10 minutes, and I just look at the clock. But the music, it's always playing, and I don't know. I think it might help them think, or maybe sometimes in the music they might pick up on a word, even if it's just one word in the whole song or something that we talked about.
So I hear you saying that the music is for some comprehension, just some for pure enjoyment, some for just relaxing. And do you also use it during transition moments?
I do, and it really depends on the class. Like my first and second period, since it's so early, I try to play a little more upbeat music because they're still trying to wake up. And then my lunch periods, 5th and 6th, they're very hyper. So I try to use more calming music with them just to get them to relax a little.
Do you allow students to give suggestions for music?
I do. I tell them they can suggest. So some of them, or a lot of them, don't listen to music in Spanish, but I try to find something similar. They'll give me the name of the person or band. But surprisingly, a lot of the English that speak English and the musicians, they do a lot of collaborations with Spanish speakers in music. So I've been pleasantly surprised on some of them.
Okay. Do you have a lot of students in your class who are marked as special ed or ESS?
There's one where I do, and I have a co-teacher. I think that's the one that you were in. Yes, I'd say.
Yeah, she was in there in the other side of the room.
Yeah. So I'd say half had an IEP.
Half of the class?
Yeah.
Okay, so with is that a big challenge for you?
It was at the beginning. Like last year, it isn't so much now. They do get like more time on assignments, like to turn things in, and then the word wall to help them. And I just keep that up there always, regardless if they have an IEP or not. There's a word wall where they can look. And online, there's one where every time we learn a new word, I put it in there for them, and they can always reference back to that.
Okay, so you look at their IEPs, and then you decide. Most of them are extra time on task,
Yes.
and so what other ways do you differentiate that's not necessarily in their IEP?
I give them options on some assignments, like you can either draw and illustrate and label something, or if you're better at writing, you can write it, or you can record yourself saying it if you're more verbal. So I give them options, and that really, I think that's the best way to differentiate, not just with IEP, but all students in general, just giving them an option on how they want to submit things.
So you kind of, I hear you saying that you're not just differentiating for the special ed kids, everyone gets a way to differentiate with some choice in the matter.
Right.
Okay. And do you have any gifted learners in there?
I do not.
No gifted learners? What about, do you see any challenges for teaching any type of historically underperforming groups like Black students, or, I mean, you have a lot of Hispanic students, but it's Spanish, so a lot of them already speak Spanish. So what are the challenges there for like students that already know Spanish?
Yeah, I don't see any challenges with other ethnicities or anything like that, but it is a challenge if they already speak Spanish. Some of the things are just too easy for them. They get bored, and some of the things, or they think they might know, but they learned it incorrectly. So they try to fight me a little on that, like that's not the way I say it, or that's not the way I learned it. So there is that challenge. And I just have to tell them this is the way we're learning it, you know. You have to learn a new way.
Tell me about how maybe you use culture in this lesson.
Well, in this lesson, this was about Selena's widower. So if they grew up Hispanic, they might have heard of Selena, maybe watched the movie. And that in and of itself is cultural, because we are going to listen to one of his songs that he wrote for her in Spanish after she passed. So that'll be cultural also. So it ties into the Hispanic community. She was such a big part of the Hispanic community. So they probably grew up listening, like their mom might have listened to it or to her music, or seen the movie or something.
Yeah, I remember when I taught about that. But I was actually teaching right when it happened.
Oh.
So it was different because the emotions were very high, and the amount of recognition of who she was very high, because it was just on the news and everybody knew. So it was a big deal, right? Because I was a brand new teacher back then, but I taught about it back then. But here it is 20 years later, and we're still teaching about that because there's some kind of fascination with that. And so what I'm trying to say with that is, like, when you take things that are high interest, it can really, grab the kids. Do you feel that's true?
Yes, definitely. I mean, and her story is so, I have some that have never heard of her. They're not, they don't speak Spanish, or it just didn't grow up with them. So I was telling them how she was murdered by her friend and fan club manager, and they were just intrigued because the story is fascinating for anyone, I think. So it really grabbed their attention when I was telling them who these people were if they hadn't heard of them, and how heartbroken he was. And we even got into this conversation off track on one of my classes. A girl asked, didn't he remarry again? And I said, yes, he remarried, but it didn't work out. And I said, I think he still loves her, and it just, no relationship could work. So that led us into this whole different thing. But I really appreciated that moment where,
they're connecting. They're connecting to it. And so when you picked this lesson, what was the learning outcome for what did you want students to come away with when they finished that lesson?
Well, that was to introduce them to those 3 words or 3 phrases. So I wanted them to know. I think that image of him getting close to the casket would really be on their minds, and seeing a lot of flowers, the imagery, there. And that's one of the things that they kept repeating that they learned a lot when they had to rephrase part of the story in Spanish. Almost all of them put that there were a lot of flowers at the funeral except with the picture. So that's the main thing I wanted them to come away with.
Do you feel like they achieved that?
I think so, yeah.
How do you know that they achieved that? What is that? What
Yes.
evidence did they have of that?
Well, the follow-up lesson to that was they had to do a story map where they retold the story in English, and almost everybody got it. Like they were able to tell me everything that happened, and then the part where they retold it in Spanish, a lot of them used at least those phrases with the words that we learned in it. Like he got close to the casket, there were a lot of flowers, and he took away the ring, the wedding ring that he had taken to him.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you were going to teach this lesson again next week, what would you change about your lesson?
Probably the personalization part of it, and maybe a little more background information. I came in assuming that everybody knew who Selena is and her story, but there's some that haven't heard of her. So maybe we could have done. I could have done like a background lesson on her story.
Maybe your music could have been Selena music.
Yeah.
So that would have been another.
Yeah, that would have been perfect. I
tie
didn't
it
think of
in.
that. Yeah.
And then just do it all. And what was your favorite part of the lesson? What made you say, yes, I did that, I got this?
Well, I really enjoyed the circling part because I think halfway through I can really see the light go off where they're getting it, and when they retell the story, that makes me see that yes, they understand at least part of the story.
I wanted to talk about one more thing that was their second brain break, and where you were saying levantate si tiene, siéntate si tiene. Tell me how you did that. What was you used technology for that?
I did. So it's to get them again used to words. Levantate, stand up, siéntate, sit down. So I use articles of clothing, or that's what I'm doing now. I'll add more to later, but articles of clothing and their color, and I use random name chooser, I think it's called, and it's a pinwheel, and it selects like the clothing and then the color of the clothing.
But you had to preload that, right?
Yeah, I had that ready.
Yeah,
and I keep adding. I'll think of more things. A teacher gave me a suggestion that we could do like short sleeve, long sleeve, or the type of fabric. I mean, you can just really do a lot.
Oh, okay. I didn't think about that. Did you had to have a tab for each one?
Yes.
So you just I was trying to figure out were you going back and forth between the tabs?
I was going back and forth.
So you would choose one, like the garment on the first one, and then the color on the second one.
Right.
And then first of all, you had to make everybody stand up, and then you had to make them sit down.
Right.
Okay, so that was good.
Yeah, so last person standing would win, but
last person standing.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the final part of your story was the story map that they were filling out. So what was your goal of that?
The story map was to see if they could follow along with the order of the story.
Did they have to write their own sentences?
They did, yes.
In Spanish?
The first part was in English and the second part was in Spanish.
Okay. And that gave them a kind of a graphic organizer to fill out the story and the details that they could remember.
Yeah.
Did you take those up and look at them?
Yeah, they turned it in digitally, and I'm able to check through them and see them, and I give everybody a grade for it, a 100 participation grade, but that's more for feedback for me to see where they are. If I need to go back and read, which I do, I get the story and I retell the story several times throughout the week, throughout the unit. I mean, we do several things with the story.
Okay, well, I think we've discussed everything that we can discuss about this lesson today. So I'll observe you again in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Before we do that, do you have a goal, a new goal that you would like to achieve in the next lesson?
Well, definitely the personalization.
So you want to, for the next lesson, for me to look at how you're personalizing your lesson more, and like, do we want to like say a certain amount of times that you personalize in the lesson so we can measure that? Like maybe at least 4 times you personalize. So you will personalize some of the questions to make it meaningful for the students. In addition to the more, I also meant to, some of the other things on here that you didn't use, and I didn't talk about that. And you don't have to use every single one, but one was simplify sentences, which you told me that if they didn't understand, that's what you would do. So and then rephrase the same thing, and then contrast meaning. I guess that's to show the difference between 2 words that maybe they're similar. Pop-up grammar. If you see something that's, it needs to be explained in a grammar term. So you didn't do that. I know you were dealing with past tense, so maybe that could have been put in there.
Yeah.
Sound effects. I mean, you use music, I guess that's sound, but like if you say like woof woof or something, if you think they don't understand it's dog, that would be like a sound effect. And then I think this is funny, is make facial expressions, but we have the mask on, so it's really hard. But you can do it with your eyes, your eyes can tell a lot. Yeah. And then it's got props, which use pictures, but you can use props. I've done that too. And then the last one is act it out. You might either you act it out or you could have your kids act it out, like something else. So are there any of these other observed strategies that maybe you might try to incorporate?
Maybe I could try the acting out with them. I hadn't thought of that. Like everybody show me crying and they can all do this. Or everybody, like in Spanish, I would say show me llorando or show me sonriendo. So I can do more physical things with them.
You want to do some physical? Yeah. So for the next time, we want to try to include some different strategies, including act it out, and then also to personalize at least 4 times in our lesson. Okay, and then we can plan, what you're going to do for your lesson and how to work that into acting it out. That works really well for verbs, especially. But I mean, you can do it with nouns or, show me dog, show me cat. Or you could even have them come up and be like, narrate the story. That's another way to do it. And like have 2, like if you said the girl comes from the west, the boy comes from the east. I mean, I'm just making something up. But and then the girl falls down and then she falls down. I mean, that's another way to act it out, especially if you've already told the story and you want to tell it again, but now you want to make it visual. That's another way. So I'm just giving you suggestions of what you could possibly do. But if you want everybody doing it, that's another easy way to do it. Like show me cry, show me, and that's a great you can even circle it several times. Like you do cry, and then you go on to laugh, and then you do wave, and then you come back to cry, and that way it gets extra repetition in there. So that would be another way for you to do that. Okay, so that's what we'll do for the next time. So thank you for your time today and joining us for the reflective conference. And then we'll make a plan for the next lesson and then do your observation and then another follow-up conference.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.